Welcome to Fiber MB, a podcast highlighting non-binary fiber artists in a world that primarily thinks of fiber art as feminine crafts and always seems happy when there are men in it, but forgets about the non-binary individuals. Today on our podcast, I am interviewing Sparrow Spite. Welcome, Sparrow.
Hi. Thank you so
So,
much for having me.
thank you so much for being on the podcast. I am very excited for this because you make like really awesome stuff, so
Yeah, I'm excited too.
okay, so first up, we're just gonna go with like some basic demographics. What are your pronouns?
So my pronouns are they, them, and my business, my little shop that I have, we have two shops. So sparrowspite.com is where you can find my pieces that I make, and then we also have Pocket Crafts Club, which is a website for other shuttle tatters to gain knowledge and buy resources and my patterns. And that is run by my shop manager, Betty, whose pronouns are also they, them. And then we have one other member of our little crew, our CFO, Casey, who also goes by they, them pronouns. So we are an entire business of envies, of fiber envies.
I love that. Also, it's one of those things where like it for people who aren't used to using they them, it probably makes it a little easier because it's like, well, I'm just talking about the group.
Yeah, like we're a collective of they, thems individually.
I had a partner before who had a hard time remembering my pronouns as they them, and I told them the little trick about thinking about how there's a mouse in my pocket so that I'm always a plural existence in their life, which also worked out because most of the time that we hung out before we had started dating, my dog was with me anyway, so.
There you go. There you go.
And next question, what is your age?
I am 35 years old.
And what term do you use for your gender?
So I typically just go with the umbrella term of non-binary, but in terms of thinking of gender, I like to say my gender is no thanks. Um, Occasionally I will use terms like gender void, sometimes gender fluid, but not in the same sense that a lot of other people use it. In general, I sort of feel that my gender is um, an absence of gender, sort of not entirely like agender, because there is definitely a sense of gender to that, but still sort of something that cannot be defined by boxes and labels. So that's why, in general, I just tend to use the overall term non-binary.
That's fair. Sometimes it's easier just to be like, this is close enough.
Right. I'm like, it's a gender soup.
Yeah, we don't need a
It's
10.
gender beer. We're just not entirely sure what the ingredients are.
I love that. Are there carrots? Is it potato? Who knows?
Who knows?
And
It might be
you're
poison. We don't know.
maybe one day a little piece of beef will float to the top.
Yeah. Hopefully no bones.
Oh no, hopefully. And your fiber art. So you said that you do shuttle tatting, and I know that you do some others.
Yeah, so primarily my business is built around my shuttle tatting skills, which shuttle tatting is a form of lace making. It is a knotted lace in opposition to many types of other lace making, which are woven laces. But in addition to that, I also knit and crochet and sew. I'm in school to be a fashion designer. Really have just a real love for all things fiber related. Started out with cross stitching when I was really young, and just sort of never really stopped from there. So if there is a fiber art that I have not tried yet, then it's definitely on my list of things that I will probably try one day.
I completely understand that. So woven lace, is that like the ones with bobbins and the pillows you pin to?
Yeah, so bobbin lace is a style of woven lace. There's a couple of other styles of woven lace, both machine made and man made. If you think of like Chantilly lace, a lot of most of the commercial laces that you're going to find made for clothing are all woven laces. And woven lace is typically what people think of when you say lace. That very, very fine thread that has a sort of mesh background behind all of the design. Tatting and a few other forms of lace making are knotted laces, so a lot more similar to macrame, but just on a much smaller scale and with different techniques. So instead of being formed from multiple threads that are sort of crossed and woven and wound around each other to create that mesh, they are knotted together, and it's usually a single thread or maybe two threads at the most that are used to create designs. So it has a very different texture and a different feel than what most people associate with lace, but it is still very much lace.
Thanks for explaining the difference between those two. I always kind of wondered, but yeah, just
Yeah,
hadn't fallen into
people
my ADHD.
Yeah, people get pretty confused about the terms, especially with tatting. I've seen a lot of people really get confused about what's crochet lace and what's tatted lace. I've heard people refer to tatting as like an overall lace term for any handmade lace, and I'm like, that's not correct. It's a specific form. You also have like needle lace and other forms of knotted lace. So it can be pretty confusing if you're not super familiar with the intricacies of the lace world.
What I'm hearing is if you're interested, there's a rabbit hole for you to fall into, folks.
Very much. Yeah.
Okay, so for your fiber arts journey in life, when did you first begin?
So I started with cross stitch when I think I was 5 or 6. Um, my grandmother had a habit of, for birthday presents and Christmas presents, instead of just giving us things, she would send us things to make, things to do. So like the klutz books and puzzles and like the color by number books and things like that. And as I got older, she would introduce me to newer, more advanced levels of types of crafts and things. So she started me with origami, and then from there, I delved into fiber crafts with the cross stitch and the little cross stitch kits that she would send me. And I learned tatting when I was 9, sort of a family tradition that everyone in the family learns how to do. And from there, I just sort of fell in love with all things fiber. I taught myself crochet when I was about 12. I started getting interested in sewing when I was 14 or 15, and really, really kind of took off more with that in later years when I was a lot older, and then started teaching tatting when I was 19. So it sort of feels like it's been part of me for my whole life.
Frankly, the idea of getting make it gifts is amazing. I
Right? It was always the gift that I looked forward to the most.
I don't blame you. I think that that sounds great. I definitely got a lot of books as a kid, which is fine. I loved books.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. It just sounds great to even as an adult, I'm like, please get me these kits so that I
Right?
can make
They're
things.
fun. Like even now, you look at like the the little like make it kits in the hobby stores or whatever, and you're kind of like, you know what, like I don't really need the kit to do that thing, but it looks like a fun little project right there.
Yeah, and plus everything's already made up for you. It's ready to go. You don't have to source your materials or anything. It's just, let's go.
Yeah, I think that's why those diamond painting kits are so popular now, is because it's very sort of like low effort, but still gives you that like meditative tediousness that people who don't craft are probably missing in their lives. Because I feel like that um, is actually something that's really important for like brain health and brain growth. Is having things to do that don't require a lot of thought, but can kind of put you in that like meditative sort of experience. And I think that's one of the greatest things about fiber arts is it's really, really good for that.
Yeah, I agree. It is really, like, I can see what you're saying about the meditative tediousness because I know for my own thing in cross stitching, a lot of people will complain about just big blocks of color and how boring it is. But I'm like, yeah, but then you can just go and not think about it, and that's amazing.
Get something out and do the thing. Yep.
So you said that your grandmother sat you down and started teaching you how to tat. Do you want to go into that a little more?
Yeah. So one of the things you have to really understand about my grandmother is she was always willing to teach, but she would wait for you to be ready for it. She would wait for you to ask. So it wasn't a thing where she sat me down one day and was like, I'm going to show you how to do this because this is our family tradition. It was she was tatting herself one day when I was visiting her, and I'd never seen it before. I'd never seen her do it before, and I was, just very curious and was like, what are you doing? And she was like, do you want to learn? And I was like, yes, of course, of course I do. So it was a very natural sort of process for me in terms of that desire to learn, which I think definitely helps with something that certain types of fiber crafts have a reputation for being difficult to learn, and tatting is definitely one of those. And I think having that desire to learn really helped my young ADHD mind kind of stick with it. And yeah, so she sat me down on her couch with a little red plastic shuttle and some yarn and started teaching me the knots. And I just kind of fell in love with it just from the get-go. And I picked it up fairly quickly. We like to joke that it's already in our blood to know how to do this, and so it's just sort of like remembering those ancestral memories coming out. But yeah, I think I picked it up in about a day, and then from there I really spent a lot of time just by myself exploring and learning and experimenting on my own. I didn't really connect with a larger community or other tatters until much, much later. I think it was about 18. Yeah, I was 18 or 19 when I was invited to attend a tatting convention, and that was the first time I'd really ever been around other tatters. So I have a lot of idiosyncrasies with how I my specific style for tatting that I probably wouldn't have picked up if it wasn't for the fact that I had so much freedom to really explore on my own with it. And I think that's really influenced my approach to both teaching and designing now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like when you're not in large groups of people who are constantly checking over your work or peeking at what you're doing, you just kind of get the chance to do things the way that you do things and see what happens.
Yeah, and my grandmother very much had this philosophy of there's no real wrong way to do something. There's only whether it gets you the results that you want or not. And if it doesn't, then, what did you learn from it? So she very much instilled in me this idea that, making mistakes is part of the learning process. And, not every mistake is a bad thing necessarily. Like sometimes mistakes teach us something that we didn't know we could do before. So I think that really definitely influenced a lot about my entire personality, to be honest.
I wholeheartedly agree with your grandmother's idea that like mistakes aren't bad. That's
Yeah.
something that when I'm with people who are like newer at things and they're like, "Oh no, I made a mistake." I'm like, "Yeah, but this is a good thing because I'm here and I can show you how to fix it. So in the future, if you make the same mistake, you'll know how to go back and undo it."
Yeah, and like sometimes you have to know how to do it wrong before you can figure out how to do it right. You know, in the terms of like, not necessarily there being a wrong or a right way, but like, getting the results that you want, like I said. So, yeah,
Yeah,
just a very interesting outlook on learning and on life that I don't think very many people have had. And so I think that's something unique that I bring to the table as a teacher for sure.
I would agree. I feel like a lot of times there's also a rush to get as much in a period of time as possible, as opposed to being
Yeah.
like, what we get is what
Uh,
we get.
right. And also a sense of like, well, I want to learn this quickly so that I can get to making things. And it's like, part of the fun is in the process. So when we learn to just enjoy the process, there's not as much of a rush to be perfect at it.
Definitely. There's definitely like your process creators and your product creators.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm definitely a process person. I don't like finishing or setting up to start things. I just want to be making.
Just want to be making the things. And it's interesting because for me, tatting is both. But I definitely spent a long time with it as more of a process craft. Like when I was in high school, being neurospicy, having the ADHD brain, I would have trouble focusing on lectures and things unless I had something to do with my hands. And so I would bring my tatting shuttles because they're very very small. You can fit them in your pocket. That's what we call them, pocket crafts. And I would just sit and just make just rings and rings and rings with no real purpose of making something out of it, just because it was something to do with my hands and I enjoyed the process. And I think that really, spending the time just focusing on the process really helped me to develop better skills in terms of, tension and understanding how things fit together and how things work that, we try to focus on when we get to the actually making the product, when we want the product to look nice.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah, the just going through the process, just in like repeating the same thing over and over again. So the next question, you've kind of touched on it already, but we'll go ahead and ask, what's your favorite thing about your media?
Definitely the meditation aspect that I mentioned earlier, that meditative tediousness, because you're talking about something that takes a lot of time, and you're just sitting there tying knots in thread over and over and over and over. And so, it really gives you time to just kind of sit with yourself and just kind of have those quiet moments that we don't necessarily get in modern life as often anymore. And I think that really is my favorite aspect of it. And of course, I love the things that I make. I love designing and I love seeing people wear my creations and all of that. But the actual process of the making is where it's at for me.
Yeah, that's similar to me. I had a discussion with a friend the other day that the reason I sell my things is because I make things, not the other way around. I just
Right.
want to,
What do I do with this?
Yeah, I don't need all of these things hanging around my house, so I guess I'll just sell them. But it's definitely I'm making, and that is the primary purpose of what I'm doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. I really didn't intend to ever start selling, you know. A lot of artists that you see who are also teachers, you know, they start with making and selling and you know putting their work out there and gaining a reputation to start teaching. And I kind of went about it the opposite way. I started teaching, and then you know when I started putting my lessons and things online and talking about it, tatting in general more online. And I started having people ask to buy the things that I was making, and I was like, I guess. I mean, if you really want to, I can. And now it's kind of exploded into this whole thing where like you know the teaching and the lessons and the patterns that I do like I really enjoy that aspect, but I'm getting to the point where exploring the more artistic side of my creations is kind of where I feel like my actual purpose is as an artist.
So let's back up a second. Why did you decide to start teaching tatting when you were 19 then?
So it's kind of funny because I never actually intended to start teaching. Um, I was working at the public library in our town at the time, just as a page, which is the person who reshelves the books, and was having discussions about, um, you know, crafty things with the older ladies that worked there. And um, you know, it was they were just kind of like, oh, you actually do like fiber arts and things, and they were kind of, you know, had that amazement of like, you know, a younger person is actually interested in anything like that. And I was like, yeah, you know, I knit and I crochet and I sew and I tat. And the adult services coordinator, who is in charge of like all of the adult programs for the library, was like, you tat? You shuttle tap? You do that? And I was like, yeah, I've been doing it since I was a kid. And she was like, can you teach? You have to teach. You have to teach a class. Because she had been looking for somebody to teach her, and it was just sort of this like you have to teach class. I was like, I've never taught a class before, but like I guess I could give it a shot. Like, you know, I do know how to do the thing, so I guess I could try to teach. And it just, you know, I was a lot better at it than I expected. um, and it just kind of kept going from there. You know, we did several classes at the library. I've taught classes in person at several different events and other, you know, like fiber shops and things around the area. Um, so I sort of fell into it by accident, but figured out that I both really enjoy sharing the craft with other people and am really good at teaching other people how to do it in a way that is very low stress and just enjoyable. Because, you know, I really do just love the craft itself. And I think that really shows in a lot of my work and in teaching style.
Oh, 100%. The way that, like, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Like, your videos are just put together so well and, like, just really. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm blanking on my words. No, you definitely come across as somebody who's really into what you're doing and you're really excited and you've always been open to being helpful to people who are trying to get things done and making little snippet videos to show them things. So, 100%, I think it really does come through. Yeah, no, it really comes across on your videos that you're very into what you're doing, and I've seen you always willing to help people and make little like snippet videos to help them out if there's a particular thing that they're having a hard time with. So I do think that you've definitely achieved your goal there. But my question is, did the programmer actually come and sit through the class?
Oh yeah, yeah. So Beth and I are still good friends to this day. She's still at the library, And the last time I taught a class at the library, she was like, "Oh, it's been a little while since I've done it. Like I probably don't remember how." So she brought her shovels out, and we kind of had like a little refresher lesson. But yeah, she attended several of the classes, and still does remember, despite despite her fears that she had lost the knowledge. Um, it really is kind of more of a muscle memory thing. Once you learn it, you really don't lose it. But yeah, she really is still very supportive and very encouraging all the time with everything that I've done since then. And we've talked about how I really credit her with giving me that opportunity to teach and pushing me to do it, because I was really nervous and really unsure with that first class. Like here I am, some like 19 year old goth kid, showing up to teach this class with a bunch of, older people, because it was mostly, people in their 40s and 50s, 60s who were interested in learning, because not very many younger people even know what it is. And so, she really, I really, really credit her with pushing me to do that and sort of setting me on the course of where my life is headed now. So it's pretty kind of a big deal, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where sometimes you're like, okay, I guess I'll do it, and then you've done it and you're like, oh, okay, but it went well. Can we keep doing
It
it?
went really well. Like, wow. I had no idea people were even interested in this. And I felt excuse me. Um, I felt the same way about when I started selling my designs. Like, I did not think that at any point that anyone would be interested in, buying finished lace. Like, in a world of fast fashion, who's interested in handmade lace that takes 200 hours to create? Um, and was really, really surprised by the outpouring of support and the willingness for people to pay fair prices for it. So, sometimes it's important that we have those little nudges that push us outside of our comfort zone and push us to try things we may have never thought of, because like, it seemed like such a small moment in my life, and yet it um really sort of changed my life and set me on the path that I am now, even though it took me you know 10 years, 12 years to start putting things online and really taking off with it. I wouldn't have had the confidence to start making video lessons if it wasn't for the fact that I'd had so much experience doing in-person lessons.
That's fair. Also, to be fair, back when you were 19, there wasn't really as much
Yeah, it
online type
really
stuff.
like the online spaces for learning was not like what it is now at all.
No, the idea of Patreon, I don't even think YouTube was around back then.
Yeah, I don't know, because I didn't really get into YouTube when it first launched. Um, I was a lot more active in like forums and things like that. I wasn't really as active on like social media sites back when they were kind of a thing. Just getting started with like Tumblr and a lot of other places that other people my age were hanging out. I really wasn't around those spaces as much. So, but yeah, you're right. It was a very different sort of landscape than what it is now.
So, going on a new direction, are you a part of any fiber arts groups or have been? And like, are they online, offline?
Yeah, so I am part of several online communities of varying types. Not as active as I was years ago, but like I'm a lot busier now with the business and with doing my own things. But yeah, Facebook groups always have been a big thing for me in the past couple years. So I'm still in several of those. I'm in some more general crafting groups, and then I'm in some like more niche groups. I'm in some groups that are specifically geared towards tatting. Which are, a very different vibe than some of the other fiber arts groups I'm in that are geared towards younger people. And then in terms of offline interactions, I am part of the Brooklyn Lace Guild, which opened up its membership to people outside of Brooklyn during the pandemic and has taken their meetings online. They do both in person and online meetings now. So you can either go in person or you can attend via Zoom, which is really cool. So I hope one day that I get to go and visit them in person, because they've been just a really great group of people and just so fun. But yeah, I would say I have like mixed experiences with fiber groups in general.
So with the fiber arts groups that you're in, do you find that they tend to be more geared towards men, women, or just generally more men or women? And how do you feel about like being in those spaces?
Oh, they are absolutely definitely geared more towards women. And it can be a little off-putting sometimes, especially with some of the tatting specific groups, because the populace of those groups is so much older. It's not really surprising. That doesn't mean it's not necessarily disappointing, because just because you're older doesn't mean you can't learn things. But it's definitely a little bit more disappointing when it's in some of the younger demographic groups. And it never fails how many posts will start with "Hey, ladies," and no matter what group it's in, if it is not a non-binary or gender identity focused group, the responses to, no matter how gentle you are in trying to be like, hey, we're not all ladies. Um, the responses still very much seem to be like, oh, we are allowing an outsider into our space. It's not, it's still very much viewed as a women's space in which we are allowing you to exist in, is sort of the vibe I always get from that. So it can be a little bit challenging sometimes. And even on like my personal social media pages, despite having pronouns listed as like a standard thing now, many apps have where you can just have a space to put your pronouns in. People just are not, cis people are not in a habit of checking that or, thinking about that. And so it can be a little disappointing and a little challenging sometimes. And you kind of have to pick your battles sometimes with things like that. Um, but yeah, with the older group, there was one post in particular that I think about whenever gender related topics come up in terms of fiber crafts, and it was a post that started with hey ladies, and somebody said, hey, we're not all ladies here, and the person was like, oh, sorry, and went and changed and edited their post to say, hey ladies and any gentlemen who might be here. And I was like, still not inclusive. So yeah, that can be a little challenging sometimes.
I know what you mean. You're always so hopeful when you see the edit come up, and then it's like gentlemen, and it's like,
Yeah, and I'm like, it's so many less words to just say, everyone, or people, or just, you don't need that at all. Like, just ask your question. Um, I and it's we're in the middle of a culture shift for sure around, how we address people and what is considered respectful, um, versus what older generations considered respectful. So, I try to be understanding and gentle with people. Like, I had somebody ask me recently, we were out to dinner, and it was myself and two other friends, one of whom is a cis woman, and the other of whom is non-binary, and uses they them pronouns as well. And, the waitress came over and was like, "Hey, ladies, what can I get for you?" And whatever. And my non-binary friend and I both just kind of brushed it off. And my cis friend was like, if you don't mind me asking, I've always kind of wondered what is the appropriate response in a situation like that. Like, do you try to correct people? Do you want other people to correct them for you? Like, what do you prefer in this situation? Um, and I was kind of like, if it's an interaction like this where, I'm seeing this person for like maybe 20 minutes out of my life, I don't really take the time to enforce it unless I feel like it's going to be beneficial to other people in the space around me. Um, like sometimes I'll say something, but oftentimes I won't. But for people that I'm going to interact with a lot more, that I'm going to be speaking with multiple times, that I am interested in engaging with more, I do try to correct them. So, it's really a situation by situation kind of basis. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like people are starting to be a little bit more conscious of it. But unless you're really, really active in a lot of the discussions around queerness and gender identity, then it's not at the forefront of people's minds. So I try to take it, um, that what's the quote? Something about like don't assume maliciousness when ignorance will do. Ignorance in the term of just not knowing. So yeah, I try to not necessarily excuse it, but just be a little bit more gracious about it. Sorry. Um, yeah, I lost my train of thought.
I completely understand. In groups where people are like, "Hey, ladies," it definitely depends on how I'm feeling that day, how many times I've been misgendered. I might go in and be like, "Well, I had an answer to your question, but apparently you only want women to talk to you, so
Right. I'm like, well, I know the answer, but I'm not a lady, so I'll
sorry."
just roll on with my day. Which is a little bit of a snarky response, but sometimes the situation calls for that. Like I said, I try to be gentle with my corrections towards people, but every now and then, you get that one where there's a hint of something, and you're like, this person's looking for a fight. Do I feel up for it
Mm,
today? So, and sometimes I take it on, and sometimes I won't.
I know what you mean. So, related to sharing your stuff in the groups and stuff, then, do you
Yeah.
use your art to express yourself in regards to your gender?
I feel that I do, but I don't think it's in a way that is inherently obvious. Especially with the level that I'm at right now, most of my pieces are modeled by myself. And I tend to be a little bit more feminine presenting when I am dressing up nice for photos. Um, I really, in my everyday life, I tend to present a little bit more masculine, but like I definitely have a more feminine shape to my body currently, and so it comes off as being very like traditionally feminine. Lace is always considered traditionally feminine, um, but it is something that I do think I bring to the table in terms of when I design a piece, I don't have, a specific gender in mind. I don't have a specific body type in mind. I like for my pieces to suit multiple body types, multiple level of access, in terms of like being aware of disabilities and things. Um, so I think it's one of those things where it's not glaringly obvious, but when you start to look at the language that I use on my website and my descriptions and the way that I design things, it's definitely an undercurrent that very much influences how I choose to sell things, how I choose to design. And I'm hoping that in the future, when I get to a point where I can start having a more diverse set of models and get more people into my things, I can kind of show a little bit more of my viewpoint as an artist, with the idea that clothing does not have a gender, and you don't have to be a specific gender to wear any certain type of clothing. And I do get people ask me from time to time, oh, do you make anything for men? And I'm like, I make lace for anyone who wants to wear lace. Like, it's not for women or for men. It's for anyone. Um, yeah, I would say that definitely influences my art from that aspect.
I find it funny that you make lace and people are like, "Do you have things for men?" And it's like, if you think lace is for women, why do you think anything here might be for men then? Like, you've seen what's on here, it's lace.
Right. Like, like, to me, it's not even like, it doesn't even make sense as a question, because I'm like, I at no point have I ever stated that this is specifically for women. Um, and I myself, being non-binary, like, I'm very open about that. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, what can you describe what you specifically mean? Like, is it because of the colors? Because, like, I use a wide range of colors, so that can't be the question. Are you asking about sizing? Because, like, I custom make most of my pieces so that they are customized to your body size. Um, so that's not really relevant. And we all know that, like, bodies come in. There's no standard. There's really no standard measurement across the board for what sizes are women's sizes, what sizes are men's sizes. Um, Bodies come in all shapes and sizes across all genders. So it's like, what is it that they're actually asking? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I found out recently that the history of women's sizes actually was such an extremely low population percentage to use. And then on top of that, they only used like stereotypical to them white women. Like they didn't use any racialized women or anybody with disabilities. So, like, yeah, the idea of what a standard size is very, very slim.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because there's a standardized format of body measurements called the ASTM, used by clothing manufacturers, and it's based off of those measurements and that demographic, and it's so not accurate. Like, it's like, oh, we took the average of like 20 women and decided that's what everyone across the world should fit into. And it's just yeah, so that's a huge influence on why I just make things, unless it's something that is one of my lower price point items. I make some chokers and things that I make in more standard, quote unquote standard sizes. Still based on measurements. But most of my pieces that I sell are made to the person's personal measurements. So And like I said, having been doing this for going into 6 years now, making things for people, there really is no standard. People come to me with all kinds of body measurements. So yeah, it's always a little funny to me that like we in fast fashion or the fashion world, we have this like standardized list of measurements that like really nobody actually fits into, like unless you're a model, which is a very slim part of the population.
Yeah, you're just making me think of the very clear size difference between you and me. And
Yeah,
when you sent me the collar that had been made for you, and I was like, the two pieces don't even touch in the back of my neck.
yeah, I thought about that.
It's okay.
Yeah,
That's what expanders are for.
right, right.
Okay, so next question. Do you feel like your art or the doing of your art interplays with your gender or gender expression? For example, many fiber arts have a social identity as being for women, either through domestic practices or higher class women's pastimes.
Yeah, so in a way, I feel like me being a professional lace maker as a non-binary person who is pretty fluid with how I present. Like I mentioned before, I tend to present more feminine when I am dressed up for like photo shoots and things, but more masculine in my personal life. And I'm still kind of figuring out where my presentation is at. I'm coming up on 1 year of low dose testosterone, so there have been a lot of body changes and things with that. But I feel like, just the fact that I do this craft that is so heavily associated with being feminine is in of itself a little bit subversive. Like even when you just look at the history of the craft, it's always considered a women's thing. It's a little bit interesting with the history of tatting specifically because there's actually no documentation or hard evidence to prove where tatting actually came from. So you have a lot of theories around it, and legends and things like that. And we don't start getting written accounts of it until around the 1800s, and it's always accredited to women. It was one of the legends that I was taught as a child, for the origins of it, is that it was fishermen's wives invented it as a means of making a less expensive lace than what the wealthy class would have had access to, so that they could decorate their clothing in their homes in the same way that the wealthy class does. Um, or the idea that in Victorian times it was a pastime that women would take up to show that they were wealthy and of a class where they had leisure time, because it is such a time consuming thing. Um, for something so frivolous as lace, like it's not really useful in terms of surviving in life. So even up into the resurgence that it had in like the 60s and 70s, it was still very much considered like a housewife's hobby, sort of thing. So just the fact that I exist in this space and that I have been fairly influential in progressing the craft, as a non-binary person who is openly queer and open about being non-binary. Um, yeah, I think that really in of itself is kind of a expression of my gender and my entire personality as someone who is on the punk and subversive end of things.
Completely understand. I know looking around for videos and stuff, it's still mostly people who appear to be women.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And there are definitely several men who I know who tat, and yet still, though the men that I know who tat do it with the mindset of making things for women, like or making things that women would appreciate. So it still very much has that like gender role attached to it. Whereas I feel like the things that I make are a lot more fluid and a lot more modern, not just in their style, but with their intention. Because you don't have to be any specific gender to wear a lacy collar with pearls on it. Like that's something that I think plenty of men or other genders might want to wear, especially younger generations. And I think that's one of the reasons that my work appeals to younger generations.
Yeah, like pearls are birthstones, so why can't guys and other genders who are born in June wear their pearls?
Right. Like there's um, plenty of people that I know that present across a wide spectrum of, gender presentation that would appreciate a pearl necklace, like a classic pearl necklace, or something more delicate and lacy. And I think that when it comes to how we describe our work, it's time to really take a critical look at the terms that we describe, because even now, we are so used to describing things as either feminine or masculine, and even amongst like non-binary and genderqueer communities, like we have this problem of like not having the language to separate the aesthetics of an item from gender. And so I think we are, at a spot where we can kind of think critically about that and think for ourselves and decide how we want to proceed with that. So you'll see I use terms like delicate or frilly or things that it's like, okay, if we say feminine, what are you actually trying to say? And if we say masculine, what are you actually trying to say? Like, is it more rigid? Is it sturdy? Is it angular? Is it modern in a sense of aesthetic? Like, what is it that you're trying to convey with those words? Because really, when we get down to it, while most of us know what is meant by the terms feminine or masculine, they're not really very descriptive. So I think we can do better with our language there for sure.
Wholeheartedly agree. Like even when you see clothing that is for um like trans masculine people, you'll still
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of it that's like cut with the understanding that people might have wider hips or something, but then it's still like a masculine cut technically, and then has like
Right,
bright colors on it. So it's like, okay, how come, like, is that masculine or not? Because like it's for masculine people.
right. Yeah, and I think just, in general, the idea of separating clothing and how we choose to express our personal identity from gender entirely is kind of the goal. And it's not something that we can just like wake up one day and be like, we're not using these terms anymore, because that's not how the world works. It's going to have to be a very slow process, and I think it's definitely already started. Um, but yeah, as fiber artists, especially as people who create wearables and things like that and fashion, I think that we have the opportunity to kind of push for that change. And so I think that part of my goal with what I do is, because I have some visibility amongst communities, and I am somewhat recognized, and will continue to be so, hopefully, as I grow. Um, that I can kind of use that status to gently steer towards some of those goals.
And you've definitely already been doing that, so
I appreciate that. I try.
I think you're succeeding, but I might be biased.
We're all a little biased in our own ways.
It's true. So, next question. What inspires you to make or inspires the things that you make?
Such a good question. I get inspiration from a lot of places, but I think my two biggest places that I get inspiration from are music. Definitely, I always have music on when I'm kind of in my zone and really working on designing and creating new things, and also uh, certain colors or themes or like just ideas, these like abstract concepts. Like I really one of my favorite things is when my custom order customers come to me and they're like, I want something that reminds me of the sunset. And like that's the only direction I'm given. And I'm like, okay, bet, let's go. I've got this. Like that's one of my favorite things to do is to take these like abstract aesthetic concepts, I guess, and bring them into a real world creation.
Yeah, and with something like lace, that's always going to be a little abstract in a way anyway, so I can see how you would enjoy having that like here's a concept. Me personally, I would be stressed out because I need to know what you were interested in.
I think a lot of it too comes down to the fact that while I definitely capitalize on the fact that, I am a shell tatter, which is not something that's very common these days, I don't view myself as primarily just a tatter or just a lace maker. I view myself as an artist and a fashion designer. So in the same way that, someone who is a painter has a favorite type of paint, but the subject matter that they paint can be wildly different. If you have two people who like to use acrylics or like to use watercolors, like their styles may be vastly different. And so I think that really kind of influences my idea of inspiration and the things that I make because while I am working in lace, what I am making is not just a piece of lace. It is beyond that.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from there. To the listeners, I coincidentally bought a book of tatting patterns at one point and then found out that it was Sparrow's aunt who had made the book. I
Yeah,
d- and the difference in these styles between the two of them, between patterns that Sparrow makes and patterns that their aunt makes, yeah,
very, very different. Yeah.
even within the same family.
Yep. Yep. And that's honestly, I feel like the designs that I make are very different from a lot of what is out there um, from other tatters. Like, not that I'm the only person who makes like jewelry or fashion with it, but just my approach to designing, I think, is very different. Um, and I think that's really, really evident. Like my whole goal as a designer is to have someone look at a piece that I've made and instantly know that I was the one who made it. Um, and I think I've achieved that occasionally, sometimes. But I very much feel like I have a different approach to um, tatting as a useful craft in expression and art, versus a lot of the tatting community that mainly just views it as a hobby, and a way to like keep the craft alive. So they focus a lot on more historical, or historical inspired pieces, in terms of like making finished pieces. There's a lot of doilies, tablecloths, table runners, you know, things that we don't really use in our everyday life anymore.
No, and I would definitely say from what I've seen, a lot of people who are making and selling patterns too are doing a lot of fairly small things, whereas like you've done things that are larger. So I'm thinking of oh, your poison apple pattern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, you know, I would say a lot of my patterns, that especially the ones that I've put out more recently over the past couple of years, you know, I really focus on giving people a finished item and not just a finished piece of lace. So, you know, for example, the last pattern that we did for our pattern club on Patreon was for a Halloween inspired pincushion. So while there is a piece of tatting on it, it also, you know, takes some sewing skills, some hand sewing skills to make a little. It's like a little petit four cake inspired pincushion. So it's a little heart pincushion with a tatted heart on top, and it's like you can take that piece of tatting and you can use it for whatever you want. But here's a finished product that, you know, this is what I made with it, and I will show you how to make the exact same thing. So I think my patterns definitely sort of vary from the standard in that sense, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people too, when they think of lace, they just think of something that they like pin on to a collar if that's their vibe or their sleeves or something, and not I pick up this piece of lace and I wear it individually.
Right. And, you know, tatting is a little bit unique in that aspect compared to machine made lace are familiar with, because it is sturdy enough to stand up on its own and to be worn alone without needing a backing or needing to be stitched down to something because it's a lot sturdier. So yeah, I think that's where some people, you know, they look at tatting and they're like, oh, it looks really fun to do, but I don't know what I would do with the finished piece. And I think that's one of the reasons that I have focused so much on giving people finished products, because I'm like, look, here's something you can do with it. You know, like here are some examples. Here are some modern ways that are not just doilies or edging that you can, you know, actually apply to a more modern aesthetic. And, you know, also with that idea in mind that it's okay to just enjoy doing something. You don't have to create a finished product to enjoy the action itself. You know, capitalist society has really sort of shifted our view towards hobbies in that regard. Um, but yeah, like I just I want people to understand that, um, you know, this as an art form, as a hobby, whether you are, you know, trying to sell pieces or just doing it for fun, or if you want to, you know, specifically make things to accompany another fiber art, or another art form that you do, just play with it and have fun with it. Like, not everything needs to be so strictly bound by our past concepts of what we could do with it. Like, there are no rules when it comes to art like this.
No, and we live in a world now where we've become more globalized. Our ability to learn things is much more widespread than before, thanks to the internet. So we're in a position that Victorian people wouldn't have been in to know different types of art outside of what would have been available in Victorian England and mix these things together.
Exactly. Very, very much so. Like, one of the things I had wanted to play around with and really haven't had time to sit down and dive into, but plan to do at some point. You know, as someone with Native heritage, I would really like to find a way to incorporate beadwork in with my tatting, and sort of combine the two sides of my family heritage together in that sense. And I feel like, in a modern era, we have a lot more access to knowledge and a lot more access to connect in ways that we didn't before, like you said. And so, I think people get stuck with their own expectations of what it means to create. And, sometimes we have to, unstick ourselves and be like, what if? Don't be afraid to ask what if. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to combine, different crafts, different aspects of um, yourself and your life and your influences there, because I think art is very much a reflection of our personal life and our journeys through life. So yeah, I would really encourage people to think outside the box in those terms.
Also, just to do fun things once in a while. Like in my
Yeah,
Facebook
it's
memories,
okay to just have fun.
yeah, my Facebook memories recently had the teeny tiny little crown that you made on the kitty who you got dressed up with a cape. And
Yeah,
like, how practical is that? Is that cat gonna wear that crown all the time? No, but it was worth it for that 10 minutes.
it's totally worth it just for the photos.
That kitty was
Yeah, I
glorious.
remember the one you're talking about. Yeah, for Django, my friend Ash's cat. They it was one of those things where it was like, wouldn't it be silly? And I was like, you know what? We're doing it. Like, just because. And there was another time, like, several years ago when, like, the tattooed eyebrow trend was, like, really popping off. So I made, people often confuse tatting with tattooing. So just to be silly, I made tatted eyebrows and was like, oh, I think I did it wrong. Here's my tatted eyebrows. So like, just silly little things like that. I think really is something the world needs more of, to be honest.
Wholehearted. Yeah, no, we really just need to have more things that are for enjoyment and not necessarily, again, process versus product. Like, why can't you just do the thing because you enjoy it and not necessarily because you need the product or want to sell it?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, last question. Tell us what your favorite thing is you've made so far, no matter what it is.
Oh gosh. So my favorite thing that I have made to date is the witch lore collar that I made for a magazine feature. It was the Weird and Wise witch lore issue, um, which unfortunately the magazine is no longer in print. But it was a really fun project, and it was a very personal project for me. The whole theme was, what does witch lore mean to you? And as someone who, was raised extremely conservative, and is now, openly queer, openly pagan, it really sort of gave me an opportunity to take my art and kind of delve into those personal feelings around it, and create something about it. There's art therapy for a reason, and so that project was very, very personal to me. And it was also the first project I made where I felt like I actually gave myself the freedom to express my art versus, trying to make things that I thought other people would want, um, which is something I hope to do more of in the future. And so, yeah, that's definitely my favorite project that I've made to date so far. I've got some plans for some other projects coming up that may usurp that, but we'll see. We'll see. I think that one will always have a special place in my heart, though, just for what it means to me.
That's fair. Your first is always special, regardless of what the first is.
Right, right.
And it's a good thing that you did that and feel like it gave you the space to start, like, taking things and making them the way you want them as opposed to other people because, like you said, you want people to look at things and see a Sparrow Spite project. So that's definitely going to be helpful.
For sure. I think having that sense of, your own personal voice is a journey as an artist, and it takes time to find that. And I think I'm still discovering mine. I don't think I'm quite there yet, but that was definitely the start of that journey. And I don't know that's a journey that's ever really going to end. I think we are constantly discovering ourselves, because the only thing that is constant in this world is change. And so, we change as we grow, and, art can help us process that and help us express that.
It's true. I mean, looking back at like any artist work from the beginning to where it is presently,
Mm-hmm.
they've probably gone through so many phases of, you know what, I like this at the time and I've decided it's not a thing for me anymore, or
Yeah.
just lost the ability to do certain things certain ways.
Right. It's, it's interesting to me because I think that a lot of people consider, fiber arts to be not necessarily a true art in the sense of what is art. But for me, it very much is. It's a way of self-expression, like we've talked about, and sharing my viewpoint with the world, which I think is the point of art. If you ask me what the difference between an art and a craft is, I would say it really has very little to do with the medium that's chosen and more to do with the intention and the desire to share something with the world, in terms of sharing your a certain viewpoint, sharing a story, sharing even just an idea, a concept of, I had this in my head and I wanted to make it real so that I could share it with other people. Um, yeah.
That is a good line to end on. I totally agree. I think the same thing, this division of art and craft is really much more wobbly than people in general really think of it as. So,
That's life.
it is. All the lines are wobbly.
All the lines are wobbly.
All right, so to sign off, where can people find you on the internet if they want to look at your art? I know you said it at the top, but let's say it again so that people don't have to roll back.
Sure. So all of my personal social media and my personal website is under the name Sparrow Spite. So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok are the two places where I am most active. And sparrowspite.com is where you can purchase my things that I have made, and I have some other goodies and things there, for those who want to support the artistic side of things. And then if you are interested in learning, my lessons are available on Patreon at Pocket Crafts Club. So it's patreon.com/Pocket Crafts Club. And then we also have the Pocket Crafts Club website and social media accounts, which you can follow for things like pattern updates and kit drops. We do like curated kits of threads and beads and all kinds of fun stuff through there. So, yeah, that's where you can find us there, all around the internet.
Your curated kits are so good, and I'm mad at the shipping and exchange rate in Canada.
I know. I wish that we had more control over the shipping rates, but we have none.
Yeah, I completely understand. I feel the same way anytime I ship anything, anywhere. Jeez. Oh well. So thank you so much. And listeners, if you'd like to find FiberNB on the internet, we're at Instagram under the username FiberNB. That's F like Frank, IBERENBY. If you want to email me, it's again fibernb@gmail.com. We also have a link tree in the bio of the Instagram that you can find, or you can go to Linktree. So that's linktr period ee /FiberNB. And on there, you can find submission forms to submit for yourself or to suggest for somebody else to join the podcast with me. If you're interested in hearing me interview a specific person or yourself. And we have a Ko-fi, I don't know how to pronounce it, at Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/fibermb. And we look forward to seeing everyone in the next episode. And thank you so much again, Sparrow, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Hi folks, just wanted to add a small update at the end here. When Sparrow and I recorded this episode, it was in February, and this episode is releasing in July. As we know, things change and life goes in different directions. Sparrow is focusing their own energy on doing more in-person shows in their area, and Betty, who was in charge of the Pocket Crafts Club, is going back to school full-time. This unfortunately means that the supply side of Sparrow's tatting empire is going to be shutting down for the foreseeable future. Everything is discounted automatically, and the shop will close July 31st. The patterns will still be available either through sparrowspite.com or through the Patreon. Both links are in the show notes. And you can still follow Sparrow on their TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook profiles. The Facebook group for Pocket Crafts Club will still be available if you want to hang out with some cool crafters in a welcoming space.